Awesome possum. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the first session of the day. I'm really excited. My name is Maisie Mishi, and I'm here representing FRC Team 2177, the Robettes, as you can see on my slides. And today we will be talking about safety essentials. And before I get into it, I'll give you a little background on myself. This is my 5th year in the FIRST community. I started in 8th grade on an FTC team, and I'm now have spent 4 years with the Robettes. During my time with the Robettes, I've had the privilege of serving as a mechanical lead and a team captain, but the most important role that I've served on my time on the team pertaining to this presentation is safety captain. Just like Jack, I have served for 3 years. And lastly, I was very honored to be named a Dean's List finalist at the North Star Regional this April. And in this session, give you a little overview. We'll be talking about coronavirus planning and implementation for your team. I'll go over some essential items you'll want in your shop, in your kit, just as a review. And then I'll talk about creating a successful safety program and maximizing the role of your safety captain. So first, we'll talk about COVID. Here are the most essential factors for your team to consider when you start approaching a plan for the season. First, you'll want to look at the guidelines that are set out by your state, your school, or your affiliate organization if you aren't part of a school community. You'll want to follow the lead of that organization when it comes to the mode of learning that you're in, virtual, in-person, or some kind of hybrid, because often the place where you're working or the organization you're affiliated with has more information than you do. So I would recommend following their lead on that. In addition, the size of your team might influence your decision in terms of which model of learning you're going to use. You might want to consider things like having a staggered in-person meeting schedule where you have more days a week to meet than you normally would to help minimize the attendance every night, reduce the attendance at your normal meetings, or have smaller meetings with some virtual additions to help include the whole team in that learning throughout the season. The size of your workspace is also going to be a key factor to consider when you are determining how many students you can safely accommodate throughout the season. So in my team's case, we are a small enough team where we can still have in-person meetings with just a few tweaks. So we have a capacity limit of 4 students in our shop at once. We've limited the amount of people who are able to work on the robot. And we've also set a limit of 2 students per table in our workspace to help keep everyone 6 feet apart. And at this time, it is still recommended that organizations across the state and across the country operate at 50% capacity. So I would recommend finding the blueprints for your space, or maybe you have it posted on the wall, what the normal capacity is in that room, and operating at 50% of that to start. Now, ease of access to technology and video conferencing services like Zoom and Google Meets and WebEx are also really important for mentors and students. So think about your own team. Does every student on your team have access to a reliable device and a reliable Wi-Fi connection? And do they have a place where they can meet without distraction? If not, you might want to think about how you can continue to include those students in their learning and growth throughout the season. Lastly, my most helpful tip here is to go through every aspect of your typical meeting. Walk through your space in your head. Think about what you do when you walk in. Where do you enter? Where do you go once you get in the space? Where do you put your jacket or your backpack? How many students can you safely accommodate in the rooms where you are meeting? Every aspect of your meeting can potentially pose a risk when it comes to COVID. So go through every single step of every meeting that you will have and make sure that you are working to minimize that risk. That means trying to limit your entry and exit points so that you can control and monitor how many students and mentors are in your space at once. Try to maximize the locations in your shop where you can have hand washing or hand sanitizing stations, and try to limit large group mingling. I know it's hard. I know it's fun to have group meetings, but for my team, we've had to adapt our mid-evening break time, which would usually be standing around eating snacks and talking to each other. We can't do that anymore, so we've had to divide the team in half and have social distance just dance time instead to try and keep that team bonding aspect. And lastly, I just want everyone to know that every team is going to have a different response and a different answer and a different solution to this problem, because there is not a one-size-fits-all answer to safe meetings. However, there are a lot of resources out there that can help you formulate and educate your decision for your own team. And I have a few of those here. First, of course, referring to the CDC's mask wearing, distancing, glove wearing, and sanitizing recommendations are really great. They have really up-to-date information, and they're always a good first resource if you're looking for a place to go with your plan. Next, the Minnesota Department of Health is another great organization, and specifically the planning guide for schools has been a really great resource for educators when it comes to considering different models of learning throughout the year. And that document, it's about a 5-page PDF. It is full of helpful recommendations regarding mask wearing and minimizing exposure and monitoring illness and symptoms. Even though it's for schools and we are separate organizations, oftentimes it does have some very useful tips that your team can employ. And lastly, when you're considering the more practical or technical sides of your meeting and how you're going to keep your tools and all of the components you're using throughout your meeting safe, I would highly recommend taking a look at Mr. Charles Nepomuceno from Team 3100 Lightning Turtles. He's created a 1-page sanitizing guide for keeping your tools safe as well as keeping your students safe. And lastly, implementation is...
Missy, there's a question in the chat about showing the guide to see what it looks like.
Let me go back to that if I can. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Here it is. You can find this on First Upper Midwest's page. But as you can see, Mr. Nepomuceno is a mentor for Lightning Turtles. He is also a mechanical engineer at Ecolab, so he's very knowledgeable on this subject. He recommends that you use an alcohol rating around 70%, which is the same for hand sanitizing. He points out to make sure you're watching which electrical components have seams, which is something that I never would have thought about, but is incredibly important so you don't break your materials. So I'll let you look at this for a second, but again, it's always on First Upper Midwest's COVID safety page if you would like to use it for your own team at a later date.
And there is a link in the chat as well.
Yes, John has linked to that page, so that is where you can find this guide as well. Awesome. Okay, can everyone see my presentation?
Yep, we're back now.
Awesome. So moving on to implementation. Planning is really great and it's awesome for getting the vision, but implementation is even better, and making sure you're successfully implementing your plan is the most important part of this process. So keep your team safe by communicating, enforcing, evaluating, and adapting. And if you think about it, a lot of these steps already go into building your robot and planning your season. So you're already on the right track and you're well equipped to implement a plan and any kind of plan that you make. To begin, communication. Teams have to effectively communicate their plans and expectations to students and families. Fully explaining your expectations of every team member up front is both informative for them so that they know kind of what the situation is with your team, but it's also a good way to create accountability and hold students to that standard and that expectation that you've set out for them. It also reassures families that the team has considered every aspect of their students' safety. At meetings, the teams must also be diligent in their enforcement of the COVID rules. And We know it's difficult for a lot of students because this situation is new and it is not their normal standard of operation. So we have to remember to be gentle about our reminders. It's a learning process, but you also have to continue to hold your mentors and students accountable to that plan, which is going to be a different balance for everybody, finding that happy middle. This is also a great opportunity to call on your student leaders to encourage their teammates to follow the guidelines, whether that's sub-team leads or crew leads, or just senior students on your team. This is a great time to step up to leadership. Next, observe and evaluate the execution of your plan. You will likely notice hitches and quirks in the plan throughout the season as you go. You might notice points where people like to group up or aren't wearing their masks, right? So take note of those instances and adapt your plan. Never be afraid to adapt the plan and change things if it's not working, because you want to continue to learn and change to continue keeping your team as safe as you can. As you gain more information and more guidance, continue to go back to step one and communicate that to your team and update your expectations of those students. And before we move on, I'd love to just pause here and open up the dialogue to everyone and hear what you've been doing to create and implement COVID safety plans on your own teams, because I think this is a great opportunity to share and learn with one another. So if you
Who
go ahead.
all or how many people on your team were involved in creating and modifying the plan?
On my team, it was mentors and the two captains that we have created the initial plan. We sent it into our school because that is the process that our school has taken. The school made some suggestions, sent it back, and then we were able to implement it. So mostly captains, mentors, and the school.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you'd like to share about your team's COVID efforts, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can unmute and go ahead.
Quick question before we start answering questions. Because the session is being recorded, if you answer a question from chat, if you could please restate the question so that it'll be captured in the recording.
Sure.
So I do have questions in the chat.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, Calibri. I see we have a question. Is bleach not a good idea for sanitizing, or is it just because it can stain? That is a really good question. We have not been using bleach just because our school has given us a certain type of cleaner. I would have to look more into that, but if anyone else here would have more information about bleach as a sanitizer, feel free to unmute.
I would say bleach has, a couple of downsides. It can stain. It has a very nasty odor to it that you typically don't get with alcohol-based sanitizers, and it can be very irritating on the skin. So using an alcohol-based sanitizer overall is just going to be better for enclosed places and stuff that people are going to be touching often.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So there's the question. There's the answer to a question regarding bleach for sanitizer. I also have a question. What do you find is the best way to communicate a plan to your team? For our team, what's worked really well is creating a nicely organized document that we call our COVID implementation plan and sharing it for several weeks in our team email and telling people to read it before they get to the meeting. Again, that way you create accountability, that students have to read it and be held to those expectations. As well, we have been through with our team at our meetings, we've been through the expectations, and we continue to communicate it through small reminders. If people aren't wearing their masks or aren't quite distancing, we'll gently guide during the meeting. As a piano tuner, I have been using a bleach and water solution on people's piano keys. So,
Dean, what is your dilution? Because that's pretty critical when it comes to bleach.
And then we have another comment from Hayden that says, as of now, our team will work within their departments, and then we'll have a special area to communicate with other departments. Otherwise, we use Slack to communicate electronically. That's a really great approach. I've seen a lot of teams taking kind of implementing that hybrid between having people isolated and working together, but as well using those virtual tools that we have to communicate with one another. I really like that. Our team might have to look into those virtual communication services as well. Does anybody else have any other thoughts about COVID, want to share what their team has done? Oh, Dean says maybe about 8-to-1 solution, not very high tech effort. Awesome. So I think we will move on. If anyone has any other comments, feel free to put them in the chat as well. And I really like the approach that was shared. We had some questions, it was good, but now we will move on to shop and kit items. These are basic supplies you'll want on hand in your shop and at competition. And of course, there's always room for more safety supplies and more specialized supplies, but these lists are a good place to start if you're not quite sure. So first we'll talk about the battery spill kit. You'll want Ziploc bags, preferably a gallon size or a larger size, to put the battery and any cleanup supplies in for safe disposal. Next, you'll want some paper towels to help clean up the acid and baking soda in the event of a battery spill. Then a safety sign or cone. This can be team-made, or you can go online and find a brightly colored traffic cone, but always have a way to alert others that there is a hazardous material cleanup going on so that they can steer clear and give you enough space to handle that situation. Then a shovel, and by a shovel, I do not mean a garden shovel. I mean like a sand toy that you use to build sand castles, or a measuring cup to try and reduce your exposure to the acid in any way you can. Face masks, we should already be familiar with face masks this year, but it never hurts to have extras in your battery spill kit to help you cover as much of your face as you can to reduce any possibility that there is any kind of burn. Going along with that, PPE safety goggles as opposed to safety glasses. So think about your chemistry class, the big kind of clunky ones that create a seal around your safety glasses so that, again, you're reducing the amount of skin you're exposing to this hazardous material. Then baking soda is really essential for battery spill kits. It neutralizes the acid. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a few slides. And then acid-proof gloves, another great piece of PPE to have. Look online to find them. They're pretty easy to find with a quick search. Always better to approach an acid spill with as many pieces of PPE that you can muster. Then for your first aid kit, it looks like we have something in the chat. Would a small broom and dustpan function the same as a shovel? Yes, that would serve the same purpose, that you're not contacting any acid or hazardous materials with your hands. So that's another great approach, as long as you can kind of clean the broom and dustpan off after. So getting into the first aid kit, #1 most used safety solution is Band-Aids. I'm sure we've all used a few in our time on our teams. Always have Band-Aids of as many varieties, shapes, and sizes as you can in your shop and in your travel kit, because it never hurts to have a lot of Band-Aids. They will get used, I can guarantee you. Have some gauze for any wound that is bleeding more than a Band-Aid can handle. Have some ready in case there is a larger injury. Tweezers is also something that I think gets overlooked. Splinters are surprisingly common. I've had quite a few on my team. When you're working with wood especially, or even just sharp metal shavings, they can get embedded in your finger, and that's not fun. So just get a cheap pair of tweezers. It's more sanitary and more comfortable than using a pliers. Please just get a tweezers. And a nail clipper, that's also one that gets overlooked. And maybe I'm biased because I have longer nails and a lot of my people on my team have longer nails, but they're actually really helpful because getting a chipped nail can lead to a nail rip, which exposes the sensitive part of your fingernail and nail bed, which is incredibly painful and uncomfortable. So I would encourage you to just go to CVS or find one online, just get a cheap pair of nail clippers and keep it in your travel kit. Alcohol wipes are always good. They'll come in most pre-prepared first aid kits to have for sanitizing and cleaning injuries. Along with that, burn cream. If anyone gets burned on a soldering iron or sheet metal that came off a bandsaw, it's good to have some burn ointment as well. Make sure you have a source of cold water somewhere in your shop in case there is a burn. Next, hair ties. Again, I'm probably a little biased on this one because I do have pretty long hair, but for any long-haired people on your team, keep a stash of hair ties for them. To work safely, everyone needs to have their hair above their shoulders and out of their face, and in case someone forgets, it's just always a good thing to have extras rather than making them either figure out some other solution that could harm them or their hair, or to just go without a hair tie. So always have a few extra in your kit. Earplugs, aside from the ear protection, headphone, earmuff, noise canceling devices that you probably have in your shop near your bandsaws and drill presses, make sure you have some just disposable earplugs available for those who have sensitive hearing or those that will be working with loud tools and there aren't any available. That's often overlooked, but we want to make sure that we, in addition to protecting our hands and our hair and the rest of our bodies, we're taking care of our eardrums. And lastly, put some feminine hygiene supplies in your kit for anyone on your team that may need them. It's a great thing to help accommodate your teammates and provide them with essential supplies. And lastly, I just have a few miscellaneous materials and procedures listed that I sometimes forget to do or other people overlook. So I thought I'd share them and make sure that everyone remembers to replace or recharge their fire extinguisher. Local fire departments are often really helpful in helping you check the pressure and recharge your fire extinguisher, but it should also have documentation on it that shows you the last time it was recharged or when it should be recharged again. Along with that, update your injury logs so that there is room for people to write in them. If you have them printed, I would recommend just printing them in bulk, having a few on hand to hang up when you fill one. But also keep your old injury logs. Don't just throw them away because they're a great way to document what kind of injuries are most common on your team. But also it helps students know that there have been a lot of people who have logged injuries and it is not something to be ashamed of. It looks like we have something in the chat. Safety is the real deal. Band-aids. I cut myself twice yesterday needing Band-aids. I consider myself quite safe, but it happens to us all. That is so true. Cuts come out of nowhere, and so that's moral of the story, have some good Band-aid supplies. Going back to baking soda, like we talked about with the battery spill kit, make sure you're checking the expiration date on your baking soda and checking it with vinegar. I realized last year that one of our baking soda containers expired technically in 2015, which isn't very helpful if there is a battery spill. But if you're not sure if it's still going to be good, just pour a little bit out and put a drop or two of vinegar on top. If it fizzles and bubbles, it should be good to go. Otherwise, if it just kind of sits there and does nothing, then you know it's time to exchange it for a new container of baking soda. And lastly, this is one that I think gets overlooked, but please teach your students how to safely lift the robot with their knees and not their back, because coming from someone with back problems and back pain, please take 10 minutes, save your teammates' backs by teaching them and modeling how to lift your robot properly. It will help them in the long run so they don't throw out their backs. And now on to something that is possibly a little more fun. Team safety culture. The first rule of safety and safety cultures is that safety is never boring, because it's true. We all like to joke about safety And we all like to complain about how it gets in our way or it sometimes impedes our work, but it's important that your team's safety culture never becomes boring or irrelevant to your team members, because it isn't. It's really essential to everybody to ensure the well-being of your students. Plus, it's really fascinating if you really look into it, and it's useful in a lot of industries that your students may graduate and go on to work in. The first responsibility of the team safety captain or team leader, whoever is leading your safety efforts, is to teach every student about the safety topics they're going to need to know to be responsible on your team, and to teach them the responsibility that they have to protect their other teammates, because one person's unsafe behavior can definitely affect others. This, however, is the step where a lot of team members start to tune out because they think it's boring or irrelevant. So try diversifying the ways that you're communicating those expectations and those topics. You can give presentations, but also include discussions and ask your students what they want to learn about and monitor their engagement with your materials. People are a lot more engaged when they tell you, I really want to learn about electrical safety, and you cater to that rather than going off on some other tangent that they don't really think applies to them. And remember to always stay curious as a safety captain. There is always more to learn, and safety is truly one of the biggest areas of your team that you will get out of it what you put in. Next, engagement is the most important element in a successful safety culture. And I will say that one more time so that you really remember it. Engagement is the biggest thing that you should take away from this presentation to help you create a successful safety culture. I always use the idea that if I'm having fun, my team will have fun. And when people are having fun, they aren't tuning out and waiting for you to stop talking, which is essential in a safety captain's job. Remember that the role of a safety captain is a leadership role. Even though it's not always seen as a leadership role, it's an opportunity to serve and connect with your teammates. So if you can switch your focus from focusing on a checklist to forming those deep connections with teammates through education and seeing the opportunity to grow closer to the other students on your team, your safety culture will be built much more productively and much more openly if you see those connections and do your best to keep that open mindset of serving your team as a leader. To engage people, be creative and ask your students to apply their knowledge. After every presentation that I give, for background, I give weekly safety presentations at our meetings. I try to get students to play a game with the information that I gave them, or show me that they understand and have been listening to what I told them. So for example, proper lifting, we will all stand up in our build space, stand in front of our desks, and we will do squats so that we can go through the steps of a safe lift, and I can make sure that they understand that they shouldn't curl their back. And for clothing safety, we go through different scenarios and examples of clothing, and they tell me why it's safe in the shop or why it's not, so that I can make sure that they understand, the paragraph about safety that I just gave them. Audience participation like this during the teaching stage of your safety programming is key to increasing the retention of information and increasing the excitement about your safety programming. And lastly, learning and engagement build to create successful application of safety concepts. The safety captain and the team leaders must commit to modeling safe practices. You should always use your clamps, even when it takes longer or you feel like it's not necessary, even when it is. You should always put your safety glasses on, even when they can fog up with your masks this year. And always explain why you're putting a key away on a machine or waiting for a bandsaw to stop before you grab things. It's not always fun, it's not always convenient, but it is important because people pick up on your cues, and people don't want to listen to a safety captain who doesn't practice what they preach. And in the event that others aren't making the smartest choices about safety, it happens inevitably throughout the season. Try to gently reroute them, because positive reinforcement is always more effective than harsh criticism. Whenever my teammates are exhibiting something that isn't their safest, I always ask them to fix the issue and follow up with a little tagline. So for example, I'll be in the shop and I'll say, hey, can you tuck your hoodie strings in? And my teammate will go, yes, I will, because I want to be safe. And I will always follow up with, thank you, love you, to show that I really care about them. Now, I understand that everyone wants to use that exact same phrasing, but you can create your own way of conveying that the motive for correcting people's unsafe behavior is genuine concern and care for their safety, because it's hard to ignore someone that cares about you. And lastly, recognition of good behavior is also essential to motivating students to continue being safe and exhibiting those safe practices. Even if you see a small behavior in the shop, encourage it and point it out. You can do this with a small great job, or you're doing awesome, or you can try and create a larger safety initiative to recognize safe students. For example, in the past, I have had a wall of fame to help recognize students. I'll put their picture up on the wall and everyone has to walk past it on their way to the coat rack. This year, I'm implementing a point system for students to be able to track their own safety efforts along with those of their teammates, because it instills pride in their own accomplishments and their own application of safety concepts. And if you know me personally, my favorite way to teach, engage, and try and get people to apply safety is to keep it fun. And the way I do that is with memes. So I thought I would show you a few of the memes from my safety presentations. My team would not let me give this presentation if I didn't put some in. So these are real memes that I use in my safety presentations, but I encourage you to find a fun and unique way to keep your team engaged and laughing along with you, because I live by the motto, if they're laughing, they're listening. And I see we have something in the chat. Maybe hard to make this relevant to high school students, but let me tell you, I've seen some really bad injuries out in the industry firsthand. I have seen people lose limbs. Yes, safety is incredibly important, and people don't always understand that they will have to use safety if they go into engineering or manufacturing or those other industries. So it's always great to learn right now. Oops. And now we're going to cover the role of the safety captain and how you can really maximize what you get out of that position. So as a safety captain, by following these points, you will be knowledgeable, relatable, and you might even pick up a few awards along the way. You never know, and I can't guarantee anything. But most importantly, you will be able to keep your team safe by enriching your own learning journey and by engaging in the rich community that we have built into our FIRST community. So in the workspace, the safety captain is usually responsible for keeping track of the injury log. I know I am on my team. It is likely the same on your team. So I like to take a passive learning approach to this injury log document because it's a great way to help students be empowered to take part in their own safety. And I've found some really great success with this approach. So when students are injured, I ask them to write in the preventative measures column, which they have to write what they would do in the future if they're in the same situation to prevent the injury they're currently recording. This approach prompts students to think for themselves instead of me just telling them to do better or clamp their piece down. And next time they're in a similar situation, the hope is that they will remember the entry they're writing and maybe change their behavior. Next, make certain that your students know the location of every safety kit, fire extinguisher, defibrillator if you have one, and exit to your workspace. If there's ever an emergency, these will help your students be equipped to find the supplies they need and to make the best decisions to keep themselves and others safe. So make sure they're educated on the layout of your own shop and workspace. Also remember that a successful safety culture is one that is open and inquisitive. There are never any stupid questions in safety, and no one should be afraid to talk about safety or to come to the safety captain and ask questions, because safety is not a taboo topic. In fact, if people come to you with questions, that's a success because it means that they are taking responsibility to learn more about safety. Again, never criticize a student for asking questions or reporting an injury, because that's a huge success in some senses for a safety captain. We would prefer they not get injured, but if they're asking about it, that's a success. Create an environment where safety is safe to talk about for every student, and that's really important. And along with that, you have to be open to feedback, and I would encourage you to actively seek it out from your teammates, because you can only improve by knowing what your audience needs from you and pivoting that focus to address the issues that are most important to your team. And last, be yourself by being safe. Your teammates know you personally as a student, and they're a lot more likely to engage with your awesome self that you are every day than if you switch your personality when you're in safety captain mode and you are some imposing enforcer who just, criticizes everyone and yells rules at them. So the safety captain is a role that becomes part of your behavior and that you incorporate into your behavior in the shop. It's not a whole nother hat that you wear that is a completely different personality. So just continue to be you by being yourself and being safer, possibly, and noticing your own behavior. Then at competition, actively seek to connect with as many safety captains as you can. This is something that I would highly recommend, and it is one of my most important tips for you, is to try and find as many safety captains at competition as you can, because they are great resources. Your goal there is to learn about their safety program, not only because likely you'll have to vote on some kind of award at the end of the day, but also because it is very beneficial and interesting to hear what approaches to safety that other people are taking. I've heard so many creative and awesome and team-tailored ideas by just asking around and taking notes at competition. Not only is this a great way to make friends, because safety captains are objectively the nicest people on the team, it's also an amazing opportunity to learn new things that you can bring back to your own team. Also, be prepared with a list of questions for each safety captain. I usually ask, can you speak to me for a minute about your safety program, or what is your favorite part of your safety program? You don't need to spend an hour talking to everyone, but just get an overview and it will really enrich your learning. Be sure to bring a notepad or anything that you need to explain your own safety culture if they ask, but know that going into the conversation, your intention is to understand them, not just to wait until they're done talking. And lastly, respect every safety captain, because that makes a really big impact. Simply shaking hands and asking their name is a great way to show respect for their time and status. And it's just a great way to make new connections and make friends. Next, you can pitch in by cleaning your pit. Keeping a tidy space means that no one's going to trip on metal stock or cut themselves or not clamp things down because there's stuff in the way. Serve your team by cleaning your pit and keep your hazards at a minimum. And before competition, it's always great to help brief your team on a location map, where they should meet if there is an emergency, and any other reminders you feel are pertinent to your team before they ship out for competition. And lastly, the final area to maximize your presence is in the community. FLL and FTC teams and students are a great audience for safety activities. Look for opportunities to engage with those teams in your community, because as those students grow older and they grow into more responsible members of the FIRST community, having that foundational knowledge of safety concepts is awesome. It's going to start them off on a really great foot, and they will be able to go further with that knowledge already in their pocket. Also look for opportunities from local fire departments or other community organizations and services to learn about practical safety. I know in my community, many fire departments and community centers offer classes about first aid and CPR. And even if you aren't certified at the end of these classes, they are great opportunities to pick up new skills that you can apply in the shop and out in your community. And reflect on your own school community. Think about your own school. How many students are there? What demographics are your students? How old are they? And how can your safety knowledge be applied to their lives? For example, my team has a personal safety initiative that focuses on harassment prevention and communication within an all-girls environment, because we are an all-girls team, and that's something that we have to think about. And since I go to an all-girls school, this topic is also largely relevant to other students in my and classmates in my school. So I'm planning this year to share that initiative with my classmates to give them the tools that they need to create their own harassment prevention plans with friends and family. So it's often, there's often links between your school community and your robotics team in terms of safety and being able to share those resources. And the last tip that I have for you is to get involved with other FRC teams outside of competition, because competition is not the end of our learning journey. Reach out to them and ask to hear more about their safety programs, or to see their shop set up, or to talk about what they have in their first aid kit. I would also recommend signing up for a Chief Delphi account. It's free if you don't already have one, and just go to the safety tab, see what's going on, see what people are talking about in the safety community. I've had great success answering inquiries on Chief Delphi in those safety forums, which sparks a productive conversation, which is, again, really important. We talked about that open dialogue being essential. If you check your team email as well, people will often see your responses and presence on Chief Delphi and email you about their own safety endeavors. And I've gotten in touch with so many safety captains from across the nation by just checking my team email and seeing who wants to talk. So this brings me to the end of my information. I'm going to open up the floor to any more questions and any discussion. If you would like to share what makes your safety program successful or your favorite part of your safety program, I think that'd be a great learning opportunity. So feel free to unmute yourself or put any thoughts in the chat. Oh, love the tips. Making fun and interesting is always helpful. Thank you. Yes, making it fun and interesting is the most important thing that I think sometimes people forget. So make sure that you're engaging people.
I'd love to hear more about your harassment materials.
Sure. So something that was brought to my attention my sophomore year when I stepped up to be a safety captain, and something that I'd noticed firsthand at competition, is that sometimes students on my team are just trapped into situations or conversations that either they really don't feel comfortable in, or that take a turn south where they don't want to anymore be in that conversation anymore. So I called, at our retreat, we all got together, we discussed different approaches to communication and how they can be applied to this issue. And we've created our own team resources and our own kind of team dialogue surrounding how we can help our fellow robettes out if we see that they are in one of those situations. And we've created our own kind of language and communication tools for if we are ever in that situation, how can we flag down other robettes?
Cool. Is that on your website? Can you share that with others?
It is not on our website, but I have a presentation about it that I would be happy to share with others.
Thanks.
I like your positive approach. Any links to more material, especially on electrical safety? That is a really great question. We actually haven't been over specifically electrical safety, but I do have some competition prep presentations that I've given that cover safety with soldering irons and things like that. But I'm sure if anyone else, any other safety captains have resources on that, please feel free to share those in the chat. Used to have a picture of our safety captain standing on our robot cart. The irony there is strong.
Do you maybe want to share your contact information? I think it's on your next slide, so that if people do want to reach out to you for additional materials.
Yes. So I can always be reached at our general team email, which is 2177@therobettes.com. It will find its way to me if you ever have questions or you want to share what you're doing with your team. I'm always so excited to just talk about safety with other people. It's something I'm really passionate about. So you can always reach me there. I am always happy to have conversations or to connect with other safety enthusiasts. And what is the best way for me to share those resources with those electrical safety and personal safety resources? Should I send those to the organizers, or I can put down your team numbers?
that people could probably just email you, and you could send them out, or we can work on getting them up on our website, the team website.
Awesome. So if you reach out, I will be happy to share those with you. Always happy to help others out and share my resources.
And it looks like Todd and Alex are working on a Google site for JUMPSTART Robotics if presenters want to share any material to participants.
Awesome. I will make sure to get in touch with them about that. There are actually careers in this. Big companies have dedicated safety people. Exactly. My mom's cousin is actually an HR person, and we have hour-long conversations about safety and why it's important. So one of my challenges for this week for my students is actually to research different careers in safety and research what they do and why they're important. So again, pushing that with your teams and your students, that safety does not end when you graduate or when you move out of FRC, is really important. And it's really interesting. It's an awesome thing to learn about. Does anyone else want to share their favorite part of their own safety program or any ways that they use to keep their students engaged before it looks like we have about 5 more minutes? Please be gracious and give credit where credit is due if you use Maisie's plans.
I was going to say, we actually only have a couple more minutes. Yeah, I guess we can go all the way to 10:30. The next presentation starts at 10:35. So I just want to say thanks for the reminder on the strings on sweatshirts and stuff. Yes, the girls have the long hair usually, but a lot of the boys and stuff forget that they have their strings on their sweatshirts, and those need to be tucked in just like hair does. And anything that hangs down, doesn't matter what it is or who it has it, needs to be tucked in.
Exactly. That's a really great point. A lot of people forget that hoodie strings and sweatpants drawstrings are what we see most commonly on our team.
Maisie, do you maybe want to talk a little bit about like some of the fun things you do with safety on our team? Like the Safety Star of the Week. I've very enjoyed that for the past.
Anybody else have any other questions or discussion?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about the new initiative that we're doing this year. I kind of took some ideas from other safety captains, adapted it to what our team really needs. So this year we are doing the Amazing Safety Race. I don't know if anyone else watches the Amazing Race show, but we're doing the Amazing Safety Race. So I have 3 challenges for people every week, ranging from a creative option, an academic and research option, to a team-specific option for our own space and our own students. And every time that a student finishes one of these challenges and submits it to me, they get 5 points, and I move their marker up on the wall. It's like a pyramid on our wall, so people can see where other students are and how other students have been safe. And then at the end of the week, whoever has gained the most points gets their name and a recognition and shout out in our team email, which goes to all of our students and all of our parents. So it's a little bit like a wall of fame that is incorporated with a point system and kind of gamifying the safety. So we currently have 2 students who have completed some challenges, and 50 points is the goal for everyone by the end of the season. So I hope they'll enjoy that. We'll see how it goes.
And you just launched it this week.
I did. Our team has an injury master log, so if any other teams need a better way to keep track of everything, we have a template on the 4607 website in the safety department. That's an awesome resource. Thank you so much for sharing that. I will definitely check that out. Let me actually write that in my notes. Thank you so much. I am hoping that this presentation has been informative and effective. And I see that we are coming up to the last few minutes. So if you don't have any other questions or any other comments, feel free to take a break before your next session. I will stay on in case anyone has any other comments or questions. But thank you all so much for your attention and your questions and your openness to share with others. And I am excited to see you guys in the next few sessions, as well as hopefully later this season.
So for those of you in the current room, we have captaining next. It's also going to be presented by the Robettes. So if you're interested in that, feel free to stay in this room. We will have a little activity to keep you engaged for the next few minutes. Otherwise, feel free to drop out and join one of the other 4 other sessions that are available.